Now then, let's talk about snooping and spying. Somebody I know has gone to an extreme length to keep a watch on their partner's behaviour. This person has downloaded an app onto his partner's phone because he doesn't trust her. He thinks she's having an affair. Apparently, this app, which I believe is illegal to use unless you have consent, and of course they're not going to give you consent. We'll get onto the legalities of it in a second. This app sends you copies, I'm not kidding you, of text messages sent and received on his girlfriend's phone. I'm not kidding you. So if I sent a text message saying, "Hiya, darling, looking forward to seeing you later. What time's your fella going to the pub?" then he would receive it. And he'd also receive the reply. Doesn't matter whether she deletes it. Doesn't matter. He's already got it. This app sends you copies of text messages sent and received on the phone. And apparently, it gives you a list of phone numbers, calls and received. And you can log onto a website and see exactly where the person is. You can see where the person is, honestly, because all of these phones have 3G capability. And if you turn the 3G capability on, in fact, I don't even know if you need the 3G capability on. I think this app will tell this person where it is. Let's go now to David Kearns, who runs a commercial investigation detective agency. He's MD for Expert Investigations, one of the country's leading investigation companies. Good morning to you, David.
Morning.
Good morning. First of all, it's illegal to use unless you have the consent of the person, isn't it, David, which is counterproductive. They're never going to agree.
Absolutely. Two areas that you potentially will commit offences, criminal offences, and that's under the Computer Misuse Act and the Interception of Telecommunications Act.
Got you. Now, how prevalent are these apps, to the best of your knowledge, David?
Well, I'm really not the person to talk about all of the technical side of the things within our company, but everybody is marketing all kinds of apps for all kinds of things, and we are now living very much more in a surveillance society whereby people are covertly filming all sorts of things, covertly recording all sorts of things, so there's quite clearly a marketplace there which is very large and growing for people that want to use this kind of gadgetry.
Sure. Now, the traditional private detective work, if this lad thought that his girlfriend was sleeping behind his back, then I guess that's where you guys come in, isn't it, David? He'd give you a call and say, "These are my suspicions," and then what would happen next?
Well, I'd just point out, first and foremost, we're predominantly a commercial investigation company, but we do have a history early on of dealing with private work, and we still deal with private work now, but it's not necessarily for the nature of proving that something something immoral or adulterous is going on, but generally what somebody would do is say, I want to follow this individual, see where they're going, what they're doing, who they're associating with, and of course television just shows that you follow somebody for a short amount of time and you end up with your money shot as they sit sort of in a hotel reception. The reality is it doesn't always work like that, but the principle of gathering good evidence is placing somebody under surveillance.
And how would they charge? You mentioned commercial investigation, but just sticking with the infidelity for a second, do you charge by the hour or the day, or do you charge on a result-dependent basis?
Well, our charging structure is completely different to the majority of the industry. It's actually an unregulated industry, and anybody can be an investigator. So you can go and find somebody with a camcorder and something that's bought on the covert device that's brought on the high street, and you'll probably get it for £20 per hour. You're never going to get a guarantee for anything anyway, no matter who you are using and what cost. But there's a multitude of ways of proving all sorts of things within the private sector. And that's not just trying to prove adultery. There's a lot of cases whereby people want to actually look at their children and where their children are and who they're associating with, because they might be involved with people from a criminal element, might be involved with drugs. From the matrimonial side, where you do get very good results, is where there has been the breakdown in the relationship and one party is paying maintenance to another. Time goes by, that other party then cohabits, goes and gets a job, but doesn't declare it, so the other party is left paying and the other party is receiving double. There, a surveillance operation will quite clearly prove, in 9 times out of 10, a cohabitation and employment.
Got you. And David, you mentioned commercial premises, so would something typical of that be a boss who believes that there is fraud being committed at the workplace and maybe he wants to bug the phones? Could a boss bug his own phones, or would he need to tell the workforce?
You cannot, even law enforcement agencies, they have to get specific permission at a very, very senior cabinet level for bugging phones, for the interception of telecommunications. What companies do, and all of your listeners and yourself will be aware of this, that you will pick the phone up to, for example, an insurance company, and it will say this call is being recorded for training and monitoring. Then it is being recorded. Now, you need to be very careful for the reasons of why you are doing that and where you are therefore then going to produce evidence. Now, if you're looking at a theft or a fraud within an organisation, which is a majority of our work, there's a multitude of ways that you can actually catch those individuals that are committing that theft and fraud, and it is very, very rarely based around a phone or bugging something. You can get an awful lot of information off a phone by a lawful retrieval of the data. So if you own the phone and you own the computer as an employer, you can then go and pull deleted data out of that computer and out of that device lawfully because it is yours, and you will have a contract of employment with the individual which will have a communications policy in it which allows that.
Sure, I think I need to drag myself kicking and screaming into the 21st century with the buggings of phones. I guess it's surreptitious cameras everywhere nowadays, isn't it? In the clock face, for example, on the office wall.
There's a multitude of types of covert cameras that are available now, those that you can just buy in the high street with limited quality to those that really are exceptionally good. And of course, we live nowadays in very much a surveillance society. You can go into your local retail park and you'll find some of your auto shops that are selling cameras which are going on the dashboards of cars, and they are being obviously sold for insurance purposes, but people just use them because they like filming things that are going on in the public arena and then putting it up on Facebook and on YouTube.
David, may I finally ask some of the big cases that you've worked on? I mean, if you didn't want to bring names into the conversation, can you bring in maybe financial amounts and the background to those cases?
On the commercial side or on the private side?
Commercial. I think you're going to have the bigger, sort of more exciting cases, aren't you?
Yeah, a lot of those are based very much around, sort of the business sector. So we've done everything from a £52 million mortgage fraud to a £300,000 fraud committed by an employee. We had some people jailed last year for taking $3.2 million out of their employer's company. And we were involved with a case called Shakespeare Classic Line, and our evidence was responsible for 2 directors being convicted for a £7.2 million fraud, which was basically your timeshare selling fraud. So there's all sorts of frauds that go along, and thefts from small amounts to significantly high amounts.
So would the cops have brought you in, against these massive frauds?
No, it's actually the clients themselves, the commercial clients themselves, that bring us in. We will then gather the evidence, and then that will be handed over to the law enforcement agencies, so either the police, trading standards, and then they will take the prosecution. And
I dare say, just finally, if you're recovering $56 million, David, you want to be on a commission, don't you, rather than a set fee?
Would be nice, but nobody would tell us. Nobody would ever tell us how much we'd recovered.
Imagine that, if you're on 2.5% of 56 mil. David,
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Thank you for that. Really appreciate
You're welcome.
it. Good man.